Welcome to the Fantasy FootBaugh Podcast. Today we've got a very special edition of Mock Draft Monday and probably my favorite segment. You'll notice it's just me, and today is going to be a little bit different than what you might be used to with these mock draft episodes. What we're going to do today is we're going to hop onto Draftkings and we are going to live draft an entry into the NFL Best Ball $20 million Millionaire, $3 million to first tournament. I've just joined this draft, so we're in the waiting room right now, and while we're getting into it, and I'll share my screen when we do jump into the draft, I'm going to talk a little bit about the format and what makes it different. So, one, I think these drafts are really, really important for fantasy football players, especially early into the offseason, before a lot of people are mock drafting, because if you get on to like an ESPN and you join a mock draft, people make some weird picks, right? And so it's not a trued up version of the rankings. Their rankings are still really whack this early in the season. Of course, you can follow the money, and Draftkings, when you're playing for $3 million, the people playing these games, especially this early into drafting, are going to be sharp, right? And so what this means is doing a lot of these drafts allows us to get a clearer picture of where players are actually going to go. And I think the valuations on here are a lot sharper too. What this is, of course, it is a season-long contest, so it's best ball. It's 20 rounds. For those unfamiliar with the format, there is a heavy premium on wide receivers, right? It's full PPR, and there's 3 wide receiver slots. The point of best ball is that I don't have to manage all these contests and all these teams that I would draft. There's a maximum of 150 entries. Of course, it'd be impossible to maximize all of those lineups and optimize every single week. So what it does is it automatically fills in your lineup with your highest scorers on a week-by-week basis. That does put a premium on some players, in particular wide receivers who are boom or bust. So you might see people like Jameson Williams and Christian Watson and Quentin Johnston, who could either have 30 or 2. Those players become more valuable because they'll score for you, and then on the weeks that they get 2, you don't have to worry about them clogging up your lineup. Right, so I think that that's the main difference as far as where people are ranked and why it might be a little bit different in here. And like I said, it's going to be really sharp because this is a for-money contest in which the Sharks that are coming straight from Vegas and have played in these contests for a long time, they've got all the strategies down pat. There's typically not many tacos in these drafts because it's $25 to enter per entry. So last year I did about, I think, between 10 and 15 of these entries on the lower end, and had one make it all the way to the finals and won $3,000. I think I came in like 400th or something, which was a pleasant surprise. It was really the first year that I'd ever done it and taken it seriously, and drafted a good team with JSN and Chris Olave, Travis Etienne, Trevor Lawrence that ended up doing really well. So this year I'm committed to drafting at least 100 of these to make sure. Oh, and we're in the draft. My draft starts. Let me go ahead and share my screen. 1 second here. All right, I'm hopeful that you guys can see this. We are in the Draftkings draft. I'm going to try to make this full screen so that I can show what's on the screen here. But yes, so we're sharing now to Riverside, and we are all set. We are pick 3. And like I said, last year I did between 10 and 15 entries in this, had one go far. I'm committed to doing about 100 this year because I think it's a really good way to, again, not only sharpen your drafting chops, but also potentially make some money off of this. Obviously, my profit last year, $3,000 off of, a couple $100 in entry fees, pretty good. So I will, once again, dive into this. 12 team. It is full PPR. There are 20 rounds. So as we get deeper into this draft, there will be some names on here that I'm excited to talk about that may not have been talked about so far this offseason. Because when you're drafting for 20 rounds for 12 people, it's like 240 picks, right? And so that means that you've got to dive deep into the trenches and try to take some long shots. So we'll talk more strategy as we get into it. But just know, again, as we talk roster construction here, QB, running back, wide receiver, tight end, flex, and then a whole lot of bench spots. As we talk through the nuances here, stacking is going to be really, really important I like to think of this sort of contest as like a parlay, right? To where you're making 20 bets to say, okay, if I get Jamar Chase at the third pick in the draft here, he is going to overperform his ADP, right? I'm basically taking the shot that he's going to be the number one wide receiver in terms of points scored over the season. The way that this works too, and we're off to the races. Jahmyr Gibbs went first, as well he should. The way that this works is at the end of the season, right, they'll total up the points for the first 14 or 13 weeks of the season. I think it's 13. And the highest total in those first 13 weeks goes into a playoff round, and the first two qualify. And then from there, the number one team qualifies, and then the number one team qualifies. There's 4 rounds of playoffs per se. And then the winner takes home $3 million. And that last round is where the money is really made. So what you're looking for, too, is you want guys that are going to perform well, not only throughout the course of the season, but down the stretch, most importantly in that Week 17. So you want to stack those good matchups in Week 17. I'm on the clock. Jahmyr and Bijan are off the table. I will go ahead and take my guy, Jamar Chase, from the Cincinnati Bengals. You guys know I'm a Bengals fan. I do have the Seattle Seahawks DK Metcalf jersey on right now. That's just a guy that's been on my team. He's been a franchise cornerstone for the football clan for as long as I can remember. I think I owned him in our keeper league. That's, I would say, my main league for, 5 or 6 years. Ever since his rookie season, I took him in like the 14th round or something like that. So we've got Jamar Chase on our team already. We've got one of our wide receiver slots filled in. After Jamar, it's Puka. Between those two, I think it's really a pick-em for me. I lean towards Jamar. I think the bias comes from myself being a Bengals fan. We're also shooting for upside, right? You don't really want in best ball guys who are going to score 8 points a week. I think Jamar Chase obviously has the capability every single week to break off a couple long touchdowns, score 40 points. That's the type of player you want in best ball. That's why I'm comfortable here on the Draftkings best ball tournament to make him my number one overall selection. It's been pretty chalky so far from what it looks like. Jonathan Taylor goes 7th over Amon-Ra St. Brown, but everybody else that you'd want to be drafted has been drafted. I'm not used to this format. I usually do these on my phone, so it's a little bit different on the computer. But we are now at pick 8, and it looks like Amon-Ra is off the board. On the way back, right, I probably would like to lock in my RB1. There are a lot of people who will say to go wide receiver heavy, and I agree on that. I think going 0 RB is a little bit risky because then you're kind of relying on your rounds 9 through 15 to carry you on the running back side of things. I typically like to go hero RB, but it really depends on what falls to you in the draft. As you draft a lot of these too, again, you're never going to be perfect in 20 rounds. You're basically making this parlay that you want most of your players to perform over their expectation. The winner of this, though, will be completely perfect, and it's always a team that it's like, man, how did they get all these players on the same team? So you are shooting for that $3 million prize. Like everything else in fantasy football, you don't want to come in second place because there's no prize for that. Unfortunately, in this contest, there is a prize for second, so maybe a bad analogy. As we dive into it, though, we've got some running backs off the board. Again, pretty chalky. This does tend to go pretty chalky, at least until the later rounds where people really start to stake their claims. It's all about exposure, too. You have to figure that these people are making, 150 entries, which is the maximum on this type of contest. They're maximizing that, and they've got their spreadsheets that they want exposure in percentages to all these different players, right? And so I do like to keep track of that. I've done about 25 of these so far. And it's important, you don't want to be too overloaded on guys you don't believe in, of course, but if you're making bets essentially that, let's say you've got a 30% share in, a guy like Brock Bowers. That's 30% of your entry fees that basically disappear if he has a bad season or gets injured. So, of course, there is a lot of risk with this. And I am almost up. I would love to have Devon Achane fall to me right here. I would click his name in a heartbeat. I think otherwise I'd be forced into a pretty tough decision on the wide receiver side. I'm not the biggest fan of Nico Collins this year. I know he had kind of a down year last year. I think there's more upside in other places, but that might still be the pick. We'll see what goes right before me as Brock Bowers is off the board. I think Derrick Henry on the comeback would have been nice, but and Nico Collins is off the board. Listen, say what you will about the Miami offense, right? It will be putrid. It will be terrible this year. Obviously, Malik Willis is not going to be a high-volume passer. Obviously, they're not going to score a lot of touchdowns. But when you have the opportunity to take a talent like Devon Achane at the 22nd pick as your RB1, I am making that bet every single day, right? And that's a guy that in full PPR might catch 8 passes a game. He might be their wide receiver 1. And so looking ahead in the draft, we've got a Miami player, we've got a Cincinnati player. I think Achane is pretty terrible team proof, right? Just because he can score points in a lot of ways. He's not a guy like James Cook that you want to score 2 touchdowns a game and that's how he's scoring. He's a guy that's scoring on 8 catches for 10 yards and 15 rushes for 90 yards. That's a lot of points. And in best ball, he's got the opportunity to boom in a lot of these weeks here where we'll need him. So I will take that any day. All right, so we've got an interesting question here. Really, I could take the onesie position with Trey McBride or Josh Allen. And I think that's going to be where my decision is. It's a little bit of a quick decision, too. You only get 30 seconds per pick. Of course, it would take so long if they gave you 2 minutes per pick because there are 20 rounds. I think I will go with Trey McBride. I think my only concern here are 2 things. One, his buys in the 14th week. I will be needing a tight end to score points in the 14th week because that is the playoffs in this format. But I think over the course of the season, he'll do very, very well. My other concern with Trey McBride is if Arizona is, say, 3-10 going into the bye, do they pull out Carson Beck? And if they do, I mean, obviously that projects to be a significant downgrade. So can Carson Beck still give Trey McBride the volume that's necessary to propel Trey McBride to score as much as you'd want him to in the fantasy football playoffs? Last year, he had some fantastic weeks down the stretch, but again, it was Jacoby Brissett throwing the ball 50 times a game. I don't know that that's going to be the case again. I don't know that Jacoby's got that long of a leash. It doesn't seem like, obviously, he's the QB of the future, and Jacoby Brissett has heard that all of his career. So will they give some run to Carson Beck? Who knows? It did take until pick 30 to get Josh Allen, our first quarterback, off the board here. Otherwise, again, pretty chalky. Top of the list here, we've got Chris Olave, Kyron Williams, Zay Flowers, Breece Hall, Ladd McConkey. Again, it's very hard to keep track of who is going where in a draft like this where it's 32nd per pick. So far, though, through 3 rounds, I'm sitting on Devon Achane, Jamar Chase, and Trey McBride. Not a bad start, and I like how that looks on paper. I think Jamar Chase and Devon Achane will have some really, really strong spike weeks. I do want some stability here with my next picks. I do want to select probably double wide receiver here unless the value on a running back is crazy. Does look like I've got a couple picks until my next pick being in that 3 spot. So I'll have to rely on these guys that are coming in around that pick 40-something mark. And again, I want some more reliability there. You always want to leave the first 5 or 6 rounds with all of your wide receiver spots filled because those are your main point scorers. Obviously, you score 3 per week, and they're more prone to fluctuation, right? So you've got running backs that are going to get a guaranteed 15 carries and 0.7 of a touchdown every single week. Wide receivers could have games where the other team schemes them out, and so it's more important to lock in that position early in a draft like this. So I don't think I forgot anything on the format as far as we're concerned. Again, 20 rounds. We've got best ball, so no lineup management. Again, pretty sharp. So people like Zay Flowers and Emeka Ibuka that might fall to the 40s on ESPN, not making it here, right? There are some values here, I think, and some that I might not agree with. I will take this time to talk through Chicago Bears, because I think they're ranked incredibly high on here. The people in Vegas must know something that we don't, because Colston Loveland is ranked 40th. He's being drafted at an average ADP of 40.2, and Luther Burden at 43.1, right behind him. I think that is way too high, right? We don't know who the number 1 option on this team is going to be. And if you look at Colston Loveland, he had a bad season until really the very end. And that very end of the season was against some teams where they got in some shootouts and really relied on Caleb Williams throwing the ball 40 times. I'm not sure I believe in Colston Loveland to repeat as kind of the tight end 2 or 3, a premium option off the table. I'd much rather than selecting Colston Loveland at 40, I'd wait until 60 or 80 to get a guy like Tyler Warren, Harold Fannin, Tucker Kraft, etc., etc. As it stands right now, obviously, our tight end position is pretty locked down with Trey McBride. We're still going to need 2 others, but we're going to punt the rest of those selections until later in the draft. That's kind of the rule here, and as we talk roster construction, when you look at who has won these contests, it's typically a construction of like 3, 6, 8, and 3, or even 2, 7, or 6, 8 or 9, and then 3. With quarterbacks and tight ends, those onesie positions with 2 or 3 each. Again, even though quarterbacks score you more points than any other position, typically, you can't take too many. You just need to cover your bye weeks and you need to cover a potential injury. So 3 is probably the maximum you'd ever take. Kind of the same thing for that spot with your tight ends. And we're up to draft here. All right, interesting decision here. So we're looking at Cam Scatabo, who I don't love here. DJ Moore, who I don't love. Devontae Adams. Oh, man. I was hoping Terry McLaurin would take it back, come back around here. We might go ahead and lock in Devontae Adams, I think, here for the upside of touchdown weeks. I think I'm going to go for it. Can't pass up on Devontae Adams, obviously one of the most talented wide receivers we've had in the league in kind of my generation, and has been very good for a very long time. I believe in the Rams offense. I do think they're going to blow out some teams. I think there will be some weeks where Devontae Adams is schemed out of the game, like I said, and it's going to be more of a Puka game or even a Kyron Williams and Blake Corum game. But I think there are going to be some, if you just look at his touchdown volume, there will be some weeks where he scores twice and scores me 20 points and is scoring for me. So also in consideration there, DJ Moore, like Mike Evans probably would have been my second pick. I don't love DJ Moore. I think he's got the potential for upside, but there again, he's so hit or miss that I don't know. You never know what role he's going to play in an offense. I know they went out and paid a lot of money to get him, but I avoided him. I think Scatterbo would have been my other consideration, but really wanted to go wide receiver heavy here, especially starting with Jamar Chase and Devon Achane. I'd love to just lock in those primo wide receivers and not have to worry about it so much. I'm on the clock. I didn't even realize that. I will go ahead and reach a little bit high into the rankings here for that stack, right? And I think Joe Burrow is on the table. He's ranked 58, so I'm dipping down 8 picks here in terms of the rankings, but it is well worth it. If you think about it, right, when you pick Jamar Chase at number 3 in a best ball tournament, you are basically making the bet that Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase are going to drastically exceed their expectations for the year. And if Jamar Chase is wide receiver 1, Joe Burrow is probably between QB 1 and 3. And so what this does is it lowers the amount of bets that you're making by taking Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. Rather than having 20 individual bets, you're having 19 bets and one of them is correlated, right? So you are correlating the fact that Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase on their spike weeks are going to just blow their expectations out of the water. And what you're hoping for is one of those weeks being week 17, right? So based on the matchups in week 17, you are making that bet that, hey, once I make it to that last round of the tournament, which again, that's where all the money is, that's all that matters, is how you place in that last week, you can pretty safely say that if you play this game 150 times and you max out your entries, you'll have like 15 entries get into that $1 million, or at least win their first week, and then out of those, you might get 1 or 2 into the next round, and then 1 or 2 into the next round, right? So nothing's guaranteed. All of my players on this roster could get injured, and it could completely blow up, and my $25 is wasted. But what this bet is that I'm making is that in week 17, if Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase go absolutely ballistic and I've made it to that last round of the tournament, I'm in good shape to win some serious money. And so again, it's that lottery ticket. It's minimizing that exposure to where you were making 20 bets and now you're making 19, with one of them being correlated. Probably harping on it too much, but it's great to have stacks in here versus like a redraft league where you're playing for one season and you might need to, of course, set your lineup every week and it's going to be a little bit differently scored. Stacks are not as important, whereas here, that is how you win. The other thing that gets a little bit interesting as you get to those last weeks is, for example, like 57% of the teams in that last round of the tournament last year had JSN. So it's super, super important to draft that guy who's going to be drastically exceeding their expectations. If you miss that player, you might not win your league in order to qualify for that championship. And then it's always interesting, too, because that's not the league winner. Derrick Henry was really the winner of the guy who took that team over the top last year. He had a 45-point performance in the last round of the tournament. And who would have thought, right? It was a season that saw Derrick Henry have some drops and fumbles, and I think a lot of people would call it not his best season, but he won somebody $3 million alongside JSN and Chris Olave and some other folks that were on that winning roster, which I'd have to Google to see exactly who it was. So, looking at my team here, I've gotten a little bit distracted just talking about general strategy. I did go very heavy on the onesie positions, Joe Burrow and Trey McBride, obviously, within my first couple picks. I've got 5 players on my team, and I'm still missing an RB1 and a wide receiver. I definitely need to limit myself to flex players for the foreseeable future, really for the next 6 picks. There would be no point in taking another tight end. Obviously, there's only one tight end slot. They can score in your flex sometimes, but I'm going to punt both that and quarterback, again, because the bet that I'm making with this roster so far is that Joe Burrow and Trey McBride are going to be healthy for the entire year and going to overperform expectations. If they don't, I'm not going to win anyway, right? And so if I were to take a guy that's like a Tucker Kraft right here, that would be negatively correlated to the bet that I'm already making with this roster. So I'm a couple picks up on the clock in 4. Bucky Irving is still available here, which I do not mind as you get into the 60s. I think people forget that he had 1,500 yards as a rookie and was fantastic and played injured most of last year. Listen, I know he's going to have competition. Kenny Gainwell and Sean Tucker are both good. I don't think that he's not going to be the guy, though, and he is taken off the table. Jadarian Price is another interesting name. Probably wouldn't have gone with him. And there are a couple names that I'm looking at right here. Marvin Harrison was one of them. Would have loved to have him fall to me. Quentin Johnston would have been my pick, though. And I think it's a little bit disappointing to see him go off before Tyson here. Man, this is kind of a difficult pick for me. As I think about it, I could take a risk that the rookie out of New Orleans is going to score a lot of points. And I might go ahead and do that. Again, these are flyers. I don't have a ton of exposure to Jordan Tyson so far. I think he's somebody that I've generally not avoided, but I haven't been willing to pay the price. He's not in my top 90, I think, in my personal rankings. But when you're playing best ball, that's what we're here for, right? We're taking shots. It's that 1 in 100 chance that he has like a Jamar Chase rookie season, right? And then we're in fantastic shape. You can afford to take those bets over a guy like a DK Metcalf in a format like this. You want some of that variance. You want that high risk, high reward play combined with some of those steady players like a Tony Pollard that would probably be my pick if it came back around to me here. I'm up in 2 picks. Obviously, this is kind of a quarterback and tight end stockpile here. Dak Prescott off the board. I'm looking at Tony Pollard, and you hate to draft Tony Pollard, but I heard this, I don't know, yesterday or the day before. He's had back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. Might be hard to believe, but Tony Pollard has been kind of sneaky good and really turned it on late last year. I still think he's going to be the guy. And it does make my decision a little bit easy here. DK Metcalf is off the board. I've got his jersey on. It would have been crazy for me not to draft him here. Another name I'd be looking at is Alec Pierce. Is he the guy in Indy? Is that a bet that you want to make? I think Michael Wilson would be a fine choice here too. Man, and that would put me in a lot of exposure to the Arizona Cardinals, which, again, if we're building a lottery ticket, we don't hate that type of thing. I think I go ahead and lock in my RB2, though, with Tony Pollard. Michael Wilson may have been the correct choice there, now that I think about it. Just because, again, we've got Trey McBride. We could go and get Jacoby Brissett later on in the draft, and then we'd have that Cardinals stack, essentially making that side bet that, hey, the Cardinals are going to overperform expectations. Jacoby Brissett is going to perform really, really well all season. I do like Marvin Harrison. I think he's going to be the alpha, but Michael Wilson's been good. I mean, you can't deny that. I don't know. So I don't know if I would have done the same thing had I had the choice again. I think I've got Michael Wilson ranked above Jalen Tyson, or Jordan. Called him Jalen Tyson. I saw the Jalen Hurts. Jordan Tyson, but in a best ball format. Again, you want to take some risk. You want to get exposure to a lot of different players. I know I've got a lot of exposure on Michael Wilson already. I think he's going to have a stellar season. But I just didn't pull the trigger. Wanted to get some Jordan Tyson in my life here. All right, so we are now at pick 78. Ramondre Stevenson is a guy I'm not touching really in any format. I think Travion Henderson is going to take a lot of the work. I think it's going to be a true 50-50 split. And I don't really trust either of them in any given week more than the other. I think if you can get Tucker Kraft at pick 80, you're in great shape. I personally think he's a surefire top 5 tight end, if not a top 3. If you ask me, I think between him and Colston Loveland, there's some conversation. And I know that Tucker Kraft is going literally 40 picks later based on this ADP. At cost, that is a no-brainer. I'm taking Tucker Kraft every day of the week. Colston Loveland, too expensive. But if you told me that I could pay an 80th pick for either of them, between Colston Loveland and Tucker Kraft, I think I might take the Tucker Kraft part of that. I think he's the number one wide receiving option there. I don't mind having pick 3 here. Jamar Chase, obviously, into an Achane and McBride selection. I think I like how our team has shaped up so far. I'm a little bit light on wide receivers. I really need to focus on wide receivers here. I came in saying, 0 RB or hero RB is typically what you want to play in this just because of how important it is to have those wide receivers early and often. Those are going to be the biggest sources of variability and the biggest breakout candidates. I don't love having Jordan Tyson as my wide receiver 3, but we're going to back that up here in 9 picks as best we can with whatever wide receivers are available. So I might even, just jump into the wide receiver section. I know I need one of these guys. The problem with running backs after where we're at, as you look at this list, who else is an RB1, right? Even on their team, not to mention in fantasy football. These are obviously upside shots, and in best ball, a lot of it is, hey, can I take Ray Davis at 200 on the bet that James Cook gets hurt, right? Or do I take the backup in Denver behind J.K. Dobbins, and then that's how I score all my points, is that the person in front of them had a season-ending injury? That is sometimes how it shakes out, and some of those last-round RB picks are really what makes the difference. But it just depends, right? And you're banking on injury. You don't want to make that bet for all of your entries. I would rather have 2 guys that are locked into that starting role. And then as we get into rounds 13, 14, 15, on these later bench spots, we can start to make those bets on guys that will maybe take over the starting job or have some big games, or if there's a starter that gets hurt ahead of 1 or 2 of them. That's how we score points. Okay, so what we're looking at here, we're up in 2 picks. What I need is a wide receiver. I would be very interested in taking another rookie at the top of the table here. Mekhi Lemon, I think, is underrated. I think there's a chance he fills in that A.J. Brown role, and I don't believe in any of the wide receivers behind him and Devontae Smith. Now, do I believe in the Eagles' ability to spread the ball around the field and sustain high volume? Not really, but I think in 2 wide receiver sets, he's going to be on the field all the time. Just hope he doesn't get it taken here with like an auto draft. Oh, and he is still available. I think that makes my decision pretty easy. Here, Mekhi Lemon, we take the chalk. Who else would I even consider here? Yeah, nobody else has the upside here of a Mekhi Lemon. I think he's the clear choice. Perfect. I love that. Okay, so we've got 2 rookie wide receivers in our quote-unquote starting lineup. Little bit scary. It could go poorly, especially in the first half of the season, but I think between Joe Burrow and Achane, Jamar Chase, Devontae Adams, Trey McBride, those are guys that are going to be scoring points early and often. I think if we can avoid rookies so we can avoid that ramp-up time, For the next couple picks, that would probably be smart. I don't want Jaden Reed at the top of the table here. I'm not interested in him at all. Packers, pass catchers, you never know. Besides Tucker Kraft, who's going to get theirs? Pittman's an interesting name. I think Harold Fannin is fantastic at pick whatever we are, 99. But I've already got Trey McBride, so I don't need him. Who I do need is Wan'Dale Robinson. People forget how good he was last year. And I know different team, different circumstance, but it's not like in New York he had like less competition, I would say. Obviously, Carnell Tate is here in Tennessee. I guess I've made a little bit too much of a bet on the Tennessee offense, but I do think they're a candidate to, I guess they can't get worse, right? So I think they'll be better. I think they'll be middle of the pack, maybe 20th in the NFL, which is all I'd need. I think in two wide receiver sets, you've got Carnell Tate, you've got Wan'Dale Robinson. Wan'Dale is fantastic. I mean, if you look at his game log throughout the course of last season, he catches a lot of passes. In PPR, he's kind of a cheat code, especially at pick 100. Finished the season strong, obviously on a good new contract with the Titans. I think Cam Ward might surprise people. And will it be Carnell Tate that has the 1,200-yard season, or will it be Wan'Dale Robinson? At cost, I like them both, but I like Wan'Dale's cost better. I think Wan'Dale so far, again, I've done like 25 of these drafts already. Wan'Dale is one of my heaviest exposures. I've got more shares of Wan'Dale than almost everybody. Harold Fannin is up there as well. People that I just love, right? And obviously exposure kind of depends where you fall on the drafting segment, and especially in early rounds. You're not going to get Jamar Chase if you get the 8th pick in the draft. So having the 3rd pick, of course, afforded me the opportunity to get some more exposure to one of my favorite players as a Bengals hometown fan. But for some of these later rounds where you can reach up 8 or 10 picks, guys like Wan'Dale Robinson, I've probably got him on 40% of my teams. I think he's positioned for a really good season. Fannin as well is another guy I love. I just think he's going to be... there's a lot of talk about the Cleveland Browns. You don't know who their quarterback's going to be. I think it will probably be Deshaun Watson. Whether that's good or bad, I don't really think it matters. There's a lot of mouths to feed, but I think the only person who's going to be on the field all the time is Fannin. No more Njoku. I think he's got a legitimate shot to be top 3 in the tight end position. Or at the very worst, top 5. Towards the end of the season last year, he really was cooking. And again, that was with Shedeur. You can't say it was all that good. So they'll be throwing a lot. They'll be behind. I think that offense will run through Quinn Shawn and run through Harold Fannin. Can't go wrong with those two. Obviously, we didn't take him because we've already got Trey McBride. And so we're punting that position a little bit further down into the draft. With our next picks here, as we look at our roster, we're sitting on 5 wide receivers, 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, and 1 tight end. We're probably still looking at the flex position. I probably should take another running back here at this point with at least one of these, and then if some crazy value falls at tight end or wide receiver or QB, I wouldn't be opposed to it. This is way too late for Harold Fannin. I've been gassing him up, and the people in this league apparently do not agree. At 118, I would take him instantaneously and then just probably not draft another tight end for the rest of the draft. I'm somewhat intrigued by the quarterbacks here. We've got Jordan Love. Fannin goes off the board. I don't want to take another quarterback right now. I could go for the sub-stack of Tyler Shuck, of course, to pair with my Jordan Tyson. I think if he came back around, and what we can do is we can look at Nick Chris's team. Let's see. Does he already have 2 quarterbacks? Oh, he's still waiting on a tight end, too. How about this other guy? Who is it? Okay, so they've got 2 quarterbacks. Person in front of me is... Oh, and I'm on the clock. I didn't even realize. What I will do is I will let quarterback potentially come back around. I'm looking for either a running back or a wide receiver. At this pick here, Khalil Shakir stands out to me a little bit. I could take the upside for another rookie. I don't think I will. I do kind of want a running back, though, and I think my best option at running back is probably Bill. Again, we're making the bet that Bill is going to be the guy in Washington. Here in the 11th round or the 12th round, I don't hate that bet. I'm not super against it. I think if he gets the touchdown work, he could score for me a couple weeks. He's not an exciting pick. He's not somebody like a Casey Concepcion or even like a Tyrone Tracy, where if like Scattaboo gets hurt, he's the guy. Okay, Casey's off the board. I was considering him. I'd take a look at Khalil Shakir. I don't love Khalil Shakir, though, in best ball because he's so steady. I know he's got a couple boom games, but there are never really opportunities for him to score 30. And that's really the type of player you want. I think what I'll do is I'll lock in another quarterback, lock in another stack, and grab Tyler Shuck, especially given Joe Burrow's injury history. I hate to say it as a Bengals fan, but I don't want to run the risk of this entire entry being derailed if Joe Burrow is off the table. It kind of already is because I've got the Burrow and Chase stack, but I think I'm well suited to substack the New Orleans quarterback with his wide receiver, potentially his wide receiver one. I still think Chris Olave is going to eat. I do think the two of them are just worlds ahead of anybody else that they've got on the roster. Shuck likes to sling it, and a lot of that's going to go downfield to Olave, but some of that is going to go across the middle to Jordan Tyson. And so having these two stacks is good because what this does is it allows for me to win weeks, and win weeks meaning just put a gap in front of the rest of my league in terms of total points scored if either of these two stacks go crazy. So let's say Joe Burrow has a week where he's got 35 and Jamar Chase has 45. That basically guarantees that I'll be the highest scoring team for that week because between the rest of my 20 players, surely I can amass, another 125 points and fill in the rest of the lineup there. So you want that boom potential, and you want correlated boom potential. So Jordan Tyson and Tyler Shuck could have weeks where they go crazy. And I think we'll fill in well for when Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow are stifled by the Steelers defense or anything like that. So what we're looking at here, we've got 3 running backs, 5 wide receivers. This is about the earliest that I would consider taking another tight end. I don't really want to. But if I did, I'd be looking at guys like Chig, who I love. I'd be looking at Greg Dulcich, who I think will be fantastic. I think he's ranked way too low here. And then my other guy that I definitely will reach for is Mike Gesicki, just to strengthen that stack, that Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. You always want to have a couple pass catchers from your quarterbacks. Another guy that I could look at similarly is Juwan Johnson. But again, that's not really my priority. My priorities come in on the running back and wide receiver side of the clock. I think I'm going to start to star some of these players just so I don't forget who's at the top of my list. I think if you can get a Tyrone Tracy, a Charbonnet, like a Jalen Naylor, who I'll talk about when we get there, but those are the type of guys you want to fill your roster out. There's potential for Charbonnet to come back, and it might take until 8 weeks into the season. But if all of a sudden weeks 9 through 16 or 17, that's one of your scoring running backs, I mean, that is a bet you will make all day. And I think Charbonnet was underrated good last year until he got hurt, obviously. I do think it's going to be a split backfield. I don't believe in Jadarian Price to take over all the work instantly. So those are definitely some of the names that I'm looking at here. What I will probably do is I will probably go 1 running back, 1 wide receiver, unless I think both these two are here. I do still need to strengthen my wide receiver core as we look towards this. I'd be tempted to take like a tight end, like a Juwan Johnson, but I think I could potentially punt on that until next round and go for Greg Dulcich. Again, a lot of picks in between now and my next picks. Tyrone Tracy's off the board. If it stands how it's currently looking, what I will do is take Charbonnet and Jalen Naylor. I will take this opportunity to talk about Jalen Naylor. I'm going to go ahead and call him an early candidate for FootBaugh favorite of the year. Jalen Naylor is currently going 300th in ESPN drafts. In all of your ESPN drafts, I want you to do one thing. I don't care who else you take. If you want to take Puka Nacua first overall, I'm not going to yell at you. What I want you to do is take Jalen Naylor in every single one of your ESPN drafts. They paid him a lot of money. And, well, let me make my pick first. I'm taking Charbonnet. Again, could come back down the season and end of the season and make a difference for my team. Back to my underrated diamond in the rough, Jalen Nailor. This is a situation where we've got a rookie quarterback on a bad team that's going to be throwing the ball a lot. Again, another offense that's a candidate for improvement. There's no number one wide receiver. I mean, I would expect that not a lot of people can name 3 wide receivers on the Las Vegas Raiders. I know people watching this show and engaged with Draftkings Best Ball probably could, but they're not very good, right? Dante Thornton is another guy that I love, right? Just because of his measurables. He's like Calvin Johnson, just worse at catching the football, which is kind of important. But really, they've got nobody. Trey Tucker is a guy that's going to like go off for 40 one game out of the season and then catch 2 passes the next couple games. Jalen Nailor was buried behind Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. Listen, nobody is going to play over Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. He's a good wide receiver, and he has been good when he's been on the field. It's just like, for Minnesota, what's he doing, right? That's why I'd never take Juwan Jennings. When is Juwan Jennings even going to be on the field? He might have 2 good games this season when, like, Justin Jefferson needs a breather. Whereas Jalen Nailor, he could very well be the number 1 wide receiver for a rookie quarterback on a team that's going to be behind a whole lot, where his only target competition is their tight end and their running back, right? I think like Jack Besh is there, Trey Tucker. These are all names that I prefer Jalen Nailor. I think he's the best and the most talented. I don't care who of that group you like. I'm just urging you to take a flyer on one of those guys, because at the end of the day, like Fernando Mendoza, and this is another thing, I'll talk about this in my tips and tricks episode. Follow the money, right? And follow the Vegas projections. Vegas is your friend in one regard and one regard only, and that is within fantasy football. They give you lines for players, right? And Fernando Mendoza is projected to throw for like 3,000 yards. Where's that going to come from, right? Brock Bowers might get 1,200, and that would be like the best tight end season ever. That would be unbelievable. If I'm projecting Brock Bowers to have an average season of 1,100 yards, that's 1,900 yards that are unaccounted for and that will be split up somehow between Jalen Nailor, Trey Tucker, Jack Besh, and Dante Thornton, right? And then Ashton Genty will have 300 or 400. That is a bet I want to take. And if I can get Jalen Nailor literally for free on ESPN, I'm going to do it in every single draft, right? I mean, that is my last round pick every single time. And if you're in a keeper league, that's a guy that you want to take a late round flyer on that could potentially be your keeper for the next 3 years, right? Again, he's been buried behind Jefferson and Addison for so many years. People probably don't even know that he's in Las Vegas in your home leagues. That's somebody that I want all day, every single day, in all of my leagues if I can get him. So, Jalen Nailor is somebody that I'm obviously very high on. Jalen Nailor is a name you should remember as you go into your ESPN drafts. Scroll all the way down and pick him with your last pick. I think you'll thank me. Or at least one of those Las Vegas Raiders will break out and you'll be in good shape. So for best ball, I love it. Obviously, the money is smart. You have to take him at more of a premium. But I'm comfortable in paying the price of an 150th round pick to select a guy that I think is going to be the alpha wide receiver for a good young quarterback. Or Kirk Cousins, right? And I think Kirk Cousins likes to sling it. We know that. All right, so here's how we're shaping up. I keep getting on these tangents and distracting myself from drafting, which I can't really afford to do. Obviously, this is a paid draft, but we've got 2 quarterbacks, 4 running backs, 6 wide receivers, and 1 tight end. I like that build so far. I think what we'll probably shoot for is either a 3-6-8-3 or a 2-6-9-3. I still do need 2 tight ends, but again, I'm comfortable punting on that. Just because of our build and how we've structured this team, we've got Trey McBride, who will be scoring in our tight end slot most weeks. It does look like Dulcich is off the board, and so if I were... Oh, he just got selected right there. I think that's a good pick. Again, it's kind of the similar situation to a Jalen Nailor. I'm comfortable taking Greg Dulcich at pick 160 because you're betting on the Miami offense not being good and not having good wide receivers. You're saying, hey, I think this guy's going to catch a lot of passes. If you look at the names that Miami's got in their receiving core, I mean, it's Malik Washington, right? It's Jalen Tolbert, and it's 3 rookies. I don't think you can go wrong with taking the tight end who's had good historical performances at pass catching. I think he'll be used in a big way there. Now that I'm looking at the board, I've got a couple players at the top of my list here that I could go ahead and lock in. I think what I'll do is I'll probably take a shot on a rookie wide receiver again here in Antonio Williams, because I'm just not confident in their ability to sign somebody else. I think Ayuk is kind of doing the Gilbert Arenas and shooting himself in the foot, for another Washington reference there. I'm not confident that they're going to go out and sign another wide receiver, and I think they drafted Antonio Williams for a reason. I think he will play a big part in their offense. All right, so here is where I kind of have to look at the tight end position just so that I don't get completely phased out. There's only a couple other guys here that I actually want to have on my team. I think Cade Otton is in consideration here. I've already made my bet on the Titans offense being better. I think I will go ahead and add a leg to that parlay and take Gunnar Helm. I'm not super high on Gunnar Helm, but I think that he will be somewhat of a factor in that offense. Again, no more Chig. I think he'll be the pass-catching tight end out of that group. And really all we need him to do is fill in some of those weeks that maybe Trey McBride is on bye or not scoring. We want to make sure that we've got the coverage there. Probably looking at the running back room next round. I don't know if I'll end up having another quarterback fall to me. We'll see. Jacoby Brissett was in consideration there to add to that stack with Trey McBride. Again, you're making that bet that, hey, Trey McBride and Jacoby Brissett are going to pick up where they left off last year, and they did have a great season. May have been a good idea, but I wanted to make sure I got another tight end before we got into the weeds. You never really want positions to pass you up, and I think Gesicki is the latest tight end 3 that I'd be comfortable taking, really, in any of these drafts. Because if you look at these guys, like after Mike Gesicki, a lot of question marks. I mean, I could see Stowers being an impact player, but obviously Goddard's still there. And all of these are supreme upside shots. So what we'll probably do is we'll wait until that pick around 200 and take Gesicki. Cade Otton isn't a terrible choice around here. I don't love Njoku because they've got another tight end. I don't love any of the 4 LA tight ends. And I'm definitely in need of another running back too. As far as running back philosophy, when we get this deep into a draft and you've got names at the top of the board like Jonah Coleman, Trey Harris, Geno Smith, Jerry Jeudy, AJ Barner, none of these guys are all that inspiring, obviously. So what you're hoping for here is that maybe a running back misses some time and a guy like Jonah Coleman becomes the bell cow, right? I think Sean Tucker, good pick for that. Ray Davis, I mentioned before, Jaden Blue. I never want an injury to happen. Nobody does. But if it does, obviously in best ball, you can't go pick up a guy like Ray Davis. And you can't drop James Cook to do so. So you have to make those bets early into the season. Running back is a position where obviously a lot of injuries happen. So if you take Ray Davis, Jaden Blue, Marshawn Lloyd, right, if Josh Jacobs is out for a little bit, legal trouble or otherwise, I know he's pretty injury prone, like a Katron Allen. Even Kamani Vidal, right, he was great in a fill-in capacity last year. I know they've got Keaton Mitchell as well. Essentially, you want to make a couple of those bets for guys that could pop off late in the season, and that's your bench depth for running back. We've got our 2 starters, and again, this is why a lot of people do 0 running back or hero running back. You typically can go Devon Achane and then 5 guys in this tier, and one of them could be Braylon Allen, who all of a sudden is thrust into this role that is bigger than expected, right? So that's the bet you're making with running backs here. What I will do is I'll take a couple of those here over the next couple rounds. Might take me until kind of the last round to fill up that position. Obviously, this wide receiver slot is the most important because we prioritize these other positions so early in the draft. I would have taken Jason Stribling. I think that's a great value here in the 180s. Honestly, I considered him last round too. But I think what I have to do is lock in Oh, K. Dotton is still there. That's a little bit tempting, but obviously I've got that stack with Joe Burrow. If Mike Gesicki can make it one more round. I don't even know when my next pick is. Probably about 200. I do think it's important, though, for me to lock in another running back. It's between Ray Davis and Jaden Blue. I think I will lean Jaden Blue. Just because of perhaps Javante's injury history. We can lock that in, get our fifth wide receiver. Again, not somebody that, if this was redraft, we would want in our starting lineup, but here we are in the weeds. We are looking for guys that are going to score a couple weeks and maybe get thrust into a role later in the season if the stars align. What I probably should do here is take Gesicki and lock in that stack and avoid that risk of not getting another tight end that I'm comfortable with having as my tight end 3. It also kind of looks like at this point we are running 2 quarterbacks because we've missed the boat on that entirely, but I do feel confident that between Joe Burrow and Tyler Shuck, we're not in a bad spot. The only other consideration would be a Ray Davis type, but I think we can get a Ray Davis equivalent when we get down to this part of the draft. I think what I will do is reach for Gesicki a little bit, add to my primary stack, and essentially what this ticket, this bet slip is saying is, okay, I expect Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, the Cincinnati offense as a whole, and Mike Gesicki to be very good. Their defense is going to be terrible. They're all going to be healthy, and they're going to have a great season. On top of that, Achane is going to overperform expectations. Tony Pollard is going to be the guy, and then New Orleans is going to be sneaky good, especially Jordan Tyson and that connection from Tyler Shuck. I don't mind how that bet looks. Obviously, I need Devontae to keep up his unsustainable touchdown pace as well. I need some of these later round wide receivers to pan out. I need Mekhi Lemon, Wan'Dale Robinson, and Jordan Tyson to score, or 2 of those to score consistently, on top of guys like Jalen Nailor, Antonio Williams, that will give me weeks here and there. I think Jalen Nailor is a more reliable option who will score a lot on a week-to-week basis. But guys like Antonio Williams might give me a week here and there. And down the stretch of the season, I've got a lot of rookies. Maybe one of them pans out. I think the winner last year had 4 rookies, so you want to take some of those upside shots, but there is value in some of those old veterans, too, that people forget about. I'm done on the tight end position. I do not want another one. I would have been worried that they would have taken Gesicki from me. It probably would have happened, I think, because he's a good value at 210. Not that I love him in redraft. But especially having Joe Burrow, I was comfortable with that. I think if I could grab a guy like Nick Singleton, that would be great to back up that Tony Pollard. Let's say that Pollard gets hurt. My Nick Singleton pick in the 18th round becomes very, very valuable. Obviously, Tyjae Spears is still there, still going to be a factor, but that's something that I'm comfortable doing here at this point in the draft. On the off chance that he would become a factor later on in the season, I'm still looking for probably 2 more wide receivers and 2 more running backs, or 1 more running back, I would think. I've got 3 picks left. So I've got to make probably a wide receiver selection unless I get a guy like Singleton or Katron Allen. Again, as you get deep into the weeds here, these are some names that you probably don't need to know for your redraft leagues. Won't be on the board for you to draft a Ted Hurst or a Keon Coleman, or Chris Bell, or a Malachi Fields, or anybody like that, DeMond Claiborne. But in best ball, these are kind of the guys that win you championships. If you believe in Elijah Surratt, right, if you think he's going to be Lamar's guy, that's a bet you make, right? Or Callan Black. If Christian McCaffrey gets hurt, it's a guy you probably want on your roster. And I don't really believe in Garendo or Jordan James as I think the other guy in that backfield. I think if McCaffrey were to miss time, Callan Black is a name that you'd probably want and you'd probably know. Torrey Horton, does he usurp that number 2 or 3 receiver position in Seattle, or is it too crowded? I think a lot of these bring up some interesting conversations. I think like Mike Washington Jr., obviously if anything were to happen to Ashton Genty, you would want him. Justice Hill, what would he look like without Derrick Henry? Again, all things to think about as you get to kind of this dead area where you might not even know who these guys are. So I'm at the flex position here. I guess I could consider taking that third quarterback in Deshaun Watson. I just don't really see him scoring for me, and of course, it's a wasted pick. If he does get overtaken, Justice Hill is a name I'm looking at here. I think, I think I will go ahead and lock it in. I know they've got a rookie running back, too, that would take a lot of the early down work, but maybe Justice Hill has a game where he scores 2 touchdowns and catches a couple passes, even without a Derrick Henry injury. And I hate to say it, age cliff, Derrick Henry is 32 or 33. That's very old, right? So the chances of Justice Hill being a factor, I think, are higher this year, especially if there's a blowout, right? End of the game, put in Justice Hill, scores a couple points. That's the type of guy I'm comfortable taking a flyer on. With my next pick here, again, I'm either going wide receiver or running back. Probably I'll go wide receiver. I might be done on running back. Let's see. Who do we have at wide receiver? Like a Chris Bell, who I don't love. I think I will go for an Elijah Surratt. Again, could he be a factor in the Ravens offense? Am I confident in really anybody beyond Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews catching some passes for touchdowns, 1 yard, 1 touchdown, 1 catch? Not really. I think Rashad Bateman is probably a worse player than Surratt, but has been in the league longer, so he'll get the first crack. We'll see. Again, this is that end of the draft where those champions are made, because if you get a guy like that in the 19th round and it turns out that he's scoring for you half of your weeks, I mean, that's huge, certainly. So as we look to wrap things up, we are coming up on the last round here. I've got one more pick. I hope that this was fun. I know that we're talking about players at this point that will not be factors in ESPN leagues, but it's always good to, one, know everybody that you could potentially draft or that could be a waiver wire pickup later on when that RB1 gets hurt for a certain team. You want to know who the guy behind him is. And two, I feel like these are really sharp rankings. So as we go to the draft board and it populates, this is a pretty good, clear indication of what Vegas thinks is the most likely outcome for fantasy football this year. And I would be much more inclined to believe this than any one analyst's draft board or their rankings, and certainly over an ESPN or a sleeper rankings. Again, because follow the money, right? This is the only time where Vegas is your friend. You want to look at these and you want to look at the betting lines to see where people are actually going and where the money thinks they should go. So as we look at our draft here, I will wrap up our team after this is done. I've got one more pick here. Impossible to keep track of everybody's teams. It looked like we do have a bunch of wide receiver heavy units here where we've got 4 wide receivers before that first running back. I don't hate it either. You've got good wide receivers and then David Montgomery is your one. Couple other solid teams here. Last thing I'll say, you don't draft a team like this expecting for it to win, right? It's more of a volume game, more of a luck thing to where, and I hate to say that because there is skill involved. Over the course of a 20-week season, though, if the guy who picked first loses Jahmyr Gibbs for the season, heaven forbid, right, their entry is pretty much out, right? So take these with a grain of salt. Again, you're making that 20-leg parlay. The hit rate of a 20-leg parlay is very, very low, and that's how I look at these. You want that volume. You want to have that confidence that says, on average, I can outdraft the people that play these contests, and so I'll be profitable. Last year I was. You never know how it's going to go this year. My leans could be completely wrong, and it could go completely sideways. But that's just how it goes, right? And that is the nature of the beast. We're playing for $3 million, and so there is luck involved. It is that parlay that is that 20-leg parlay. And I'm on the clock here. I'm looking at the wide receivers around here. Boy, are these guys not who I want to be taking. I don't want any of them. I think I will lock in Kellen Black. I think it is probably too many running backs with 7. You never really want 7 running backs, but of course, because only 3 score maximum, you've got your flex positions. But as you look at my team, I think I was better served to take a spot, or a shot rather, on running back there than wide receivers. Okay, I'm going to stay in here. I'm going to go through my team real quick. In the first round, we took Jamar Chase, we took Devon Achane, we took Trey McBride. I think through 3 rounds, that is about as good as you could ask for. It would have been awesome if T. Higgins fell so that I could have the super stack of Jamar and T and then go on Joe Burrow here. Again, it's that correlated bet that you're making. But I was able to lock in that stack with Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow. Of course, hometown Bengals, very happy that that fell to me. I wouldn't force anything like that, especially in round 1 in a best ball tournament like this. But I'm fortunate that it happened here and occurred relatively naturally. Do I think that David Montgomery should go before Joe Burrow? Absolutely, right? But Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase in a best ball tournament is a dangerous stack. And if they go nuclear and have a fantastic year, I mean, that is pretty much solidifying that I'm going to lock in at least winning this league and then, get me to the playoffs. After Devontae Adams and Joe Burrow, that's my first 5 picks there. I went Jordan Tyson. Took a shot on a couple rookies there with Mekhi Lemon and Jordan Tyson. That is probably the biggest exposure I've got, is that I'm relying on scoring most likely both of these guys on a week-to-week basis, and it could take a while for them to ramp up. I think I backed that up with some more steady picks, like a Tony Pollard and a Bill Krosky-Merritt, Charbonnet, Jalen Naylor. I think they'll be reliable floors to supplement my bets on the rookie upside. But with the draft capital there and the caliber of player that they are, I believe in both of those guys to have great seasons. Wan'Dale Robinson is another guy that I'm super high on. Again, one of my biggest exposure players overall as we look at my Draftkings history. I've got Bill, I've got Tyler Shuck to complete that stack with Jordan Tyson, so I've got 2 mini stacks here. I'm betting on the Bengals, betting on the Saints. Charbonnet could come back late in the season and be a difference maker. Jalen Naylor is a guy that I absolutely love this year. All of my ESPN teams will have Jalen Naylor. Antonio Williams, rookie for Washington, betting on the fact that they don't sign Ayuk and Stephon Diggs and Tyreek Hill. If they don't, he becomes very valuable and is on the field probably all the time. Needed to bolster my tight end room, so I went Gunnar Helm, Mike Gesicki. I think K. Dotton is probably better than Gunnar Helm, and so is Dalton Schultz, but you want that upside. You want somebody who could either be 20 points a game or 1 point a game, and I think Gunnar Helm has a higher ceiling than a Dalton Schultz. Jaden Blue, again, here's where we start to rely on some of those scenarios unfolding as they do in the NFL, to where people have some injuries, people take over jobs. We might see some of Jaden Blue down the stretch. Could make a difference. Same story with Justice Hill and Callan Black. Got Mike Gesicki to further build on that Cincinnati stack. Hopefully there are games where Joe Burrow has 50 points, Jamar Chase has 50 points, and Gesicki catches 2 touchdowns, right? That's what we're betting on there. Then rounded out with another wide receiver in Elijah Surratt, who could be the guy for the Ravens behind Zay Flowers. Let me know what you think of my team here as we go ahead and end our mock draft Monday. That wasn't actually a mock draft. That was a lot of fun. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Again, Fantasy FootBaugh Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Baugh, hence the name. We'll do more of these coming up. I'll get more guests on to do some more mock drafts, but pretty happy with how that turned out. Hopefully that's the one that wins me $3 million here in the fall, but I guess the spring is when it would close up. You never know, right? And that's why we draft. Hopefully you got a little bit from where the serious fantasy football players are drafting these players right now. I think we got some good discussion on a lot of those guys too that you may or may not have even heard of. So good prep for the season. And with that, I will close out the segment, and thanks for joining. Be sure to follow, subscribe, all that jazz, and hope you enjoyed.